everybody. Welcome back to this episode of Geeky Clinicians Podcast, where we get geeked up about all things clinical and mental health. And today we have a wonderful guest, Megan Hamm, who is an LPC, and I can't wait to have us get into a great conversation with her. And so, as always, I am Dr. Deborah Dantzler, Chief Geek here at Geeky Clinicians.
Hi, I'm Jacinta. I'm Lead Geek.
Hello, everyone. I am Mona Taki, the clinical geeky yogi, and I am a first-year postmaster's resident.
Yeah. So Megan Hamm, she's an LPC. Mona, I think you can tell us a little bit about Megan.
Yes. So Megan Hamm is a dedicated therapist whose journey is defined by a deep appreciation for personal connections and the profound impact of family. With a wealth of experience in mental and behavioral health, Megan's approach is a testament to her commitment in individuals and family and overall well-being. As a licensed professional counselor, she is also a board qualified supervisor and registered play therapist in Mississippi. Megan's practice encompasses a wide spectrum spanning from children and adolescents to adults. She understands the pivotal role families play in shaping our lives, influencing our interactions with others, and molding our abilities to navigate adulthood. With this insight, Megan brings a unique focus on family therapy to her practice, aiming to help families heal from issues that manifest as behavioral changes in school, at home, and within the community as a whole. Megan's therapeutic toolkit is enriched with expressive and creative interventions, including play therapy. She tailors her approach to meet the unique needs of each individual and family, acknowledging the importance of multicultural competence. There we go. She is also trauma-informed and embraces the value of unconditional positive regard for others. Her mission is not to change people or behaviors, but to create a safe, supportive space where clients can explore their experiences and celebrate their journeys towards personal growth and change. Welcome, Megan. We're happy to have you here today.
Welcome, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much. Glad to be here.
So Megan, that is a wonderful introduction. Thank you, Mona, for reading that. And your journey, you got play therapy, you got families, you got adults. I really want to hear what is your clinical origin story? Let's go all the way back. How'd you first get introduced to this field? And tell us your clinical origin story and journey.
Of course I will. So I think I typically tell people that when I was in high school, I really did not know what I wanted to do, right? I knew I wanted to work with kids, but just not on what level. And then my senior year, I took a psychology class. Part of the psychology class was we went to a local community college and we toured the psychology department. And in doing that, they gave us the assignment, they gave us a blank piece of paper, and they told us to draw a house. And once we drew the house, they were able to tell different parts of our personality by how we drew our house. Like if we had windows, if we had a door, that meant we invited guests. If we had a doorknob, we wanted people to come, like all those things. And that really, I was like, that is fascinating to me. And so I wanted to study the brain or study human behavior. And so that's when I decided that I was going to get my degree in psychology. And so went to Jackson State, was in the psychology department, honestly took my first psychology class, and it was abnormal psych. And it started, we were talking about depression and anxiety and different things like that. And honestly, I almost quit psychology because in learning abnormal psych, I was like, I don't want to give people excuses for their behavior, right? I don't want people to be like, hey, I can treat you bad because I have depression, or I can act like this because I have anxiety. And so I went searching. I went to the social work department. I went to the education department, and I ain't like those either. So I was like, hey, I've already put 2 years into this psychology thing. Might as well see it through. I finished the degree. Glad I did. And then my first job was actually in home services, working with families the children were either in foster care or trying to get back. And so, but that job had nothing to do. I got the job because I had a social service degree, had nothing to do with psychology, right? And so I got the job. I went directly into the field and fell in love with helping families. In that journey, of course, in the beginning, it was about behavior modification, right? I tell people I'm in recovery from behavior modification because it was like, if the child has anger, we decrease the anger. If they're dealing with self-esteem, we increase the self-esteem. And so I can remember going into orientation and they were telling us, buy a deck of Uno cards, right? And we're like, buy a deck of Uno cards, because when you go and you work with these families, play Uno and you'll be able to connect with them. And, if you play Uno with the kids, they'll be able to talk to you about things that were going on. And so that's what I did. I bought a deck of Uno cards. We did treatment plans. And it was, if a child came in with anger, we would decrease the anger. If they came in with other issues, we would just do the opposite of what they were doing. And honestly, for a long time, I was behavior modification through and through, to the point where I became, lead trainer. I was helping people create these treatment plans. I was supervising people, other clinicians. And so it wasn't until one day I realized I had moved to another job doing community mental health, same thing. But everybody coming through the door, I say everybody, but there were so many people coming through the door who had been impacted by trauma. And at some point I realized playing Uno was not going to help me heal the trauma, right? It was like, hey, I need to do something else. And so that's when I really discovered even the idea of being trauma informed. And that was I'm ashamed to say it, but that was in 2012. I had already been in the field for at least 5 years by then. And so then I realized that there was something more about the behavior that we see on top, opposed to the trauma that people were dealing with, or even the way depression showed up or anxiety showed up when somebody has had a traumatic past. And I think just me being a lifelong learner and personally feeling like an imposter when people are coming to me talking about trauma and all the things they were dealing with. And I'm like, well, let's, you want to play Uno? And so that's when I decided to get more training. And that's when I found play therapy, which then led me to EMDR. And I've been on the journey ever since.
Wonderful. So the idea that Uno cards aren't a cure-all, but they're a great door opener, but they're not the final step. But I love that journey for you. And I can't believe they gave you your first psychology class was abnormal psychology. What?
It was. And I think at this point I was I had already done all the pre stuff. And so, but I think that was my first class, like in the field of psychology, and it was abnormal. And I was like, I can't tell people that it's all right to cut somebody out because your anxiety is high. Like, I can't be telling people that. And so and staying in the program, though, being able to realize that part of it, part of the diagnosis is being able to understand how our brain functions with certain diagnoses, but that doesn't mean that we're okay in the behavior that comes with it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's not a get out of jail free card. Yeah.
Definitely not.
Yeah. So Megan, you've told us your clinical origin story. So play therapy, EMDR, trauma informed. I know that you work with both children and adults, but how much of your practice, tell us a little bit about your current practice and the clients that you serve right now. What percentage of your clients are the small humans, and how much of them are adults? And do you actually do family work as a unit as well?
I do. So I'm in private practice in Mississippi, Time for Change Counseling. And so honestly, my practice is known for seeing children. So as a racial play therapist, honestly, I am the only racial play therapist in my area. And so I have, not even just in my area, but within a 45-mile radius, like 45 to 50-mile radius. And for a long time, I was the only clinician of color who was in my area. So I got a lot of referrals of, and really just wanted to bring play therapy to our community, or have for kids to have access to it, for our kids to have access to it. And so people know me for play therapy, for seeing kids. But I also see adults, and most of the adults that I recognize that I work well with, or who work well with me, are adults who've had childhood trauma. And so that was another aspect that was very interesting to me, that I was working with a lot of women, particularly Black women. Although I do work with, men, and I do have a few men on my caseload, and I do work with, people who are not African American. But a lot of times they come to me because it's, I thought I was over this until, or this thing happened to me when I was younger, and something brought it back up, and now I'm having a hard time dealing. And so so I would say percentage wise, I have 2 days a week where it may be full kids, and then I may have 1 day a week where I have a full day of adults. So probably about 75% kids, 25% adults.
Okay, all right. Mona, Jacinta, any questions?
I am wondering about the cross between EMDR and play therapy. I know that they are both very highly recommended treatments for trauma. And on the surface, it would seem that EMDR would be for adults, where play therapy would, of course, be for children. I'm wondering if there is a cross section where you might be able to use the play therapy for adults. And, well, I don't know about the MDR for children, though.
Yeah, but that's a perfect question, because honestly, I use EMDR and play therapy with both adults and with children. And so
Okay.
my EMDR play therapy story. So when I got trained in play therapy, I was blessed, honored to be able to be supervised by a woman of color, because my style, and most African American style, like most clinicians of color, we bring a lot of culture to the work that we do.
Yes.
Right. But play therapy wasn't designed for that. EMDR was not designed for that. It was not designed for us to add our own culture to it. And so when I was getting trained in play therapy, I really struggled, because I was telling her, like, that's not my style. Like, it's not my style to just, and I see that you're doing this, and I see you pick that up. Like, I felt like an imposter. And so she really helped me be able to open it up and be able to honor what play therapy was, honor what it was that we were working through with the kids, as well as honoring who I was in the playroom, and not taking my culture off, or not taking who I was as a person, who I had developed as a clinician, to be able to do play therapy.
Yeah.
And so I use play therapy as, in that terms, I use it as an intervention. So then I go and I get trained in EMDR, which is the same exact thing. It's kind of like, I told you to go 1 through 8. That's what you do. Like, I give you a script, you say the words. And I was also, when I did the training for EMDR, though, I did it through Clinicians of Color. And so that was, they were intentional in having clinicians of color who were there and training us. And so in that, I was able to get consultation to make sure that I was able to not feel like an imposter, to be able to do the protocol, as well as continue my culture, and also understanding that when EMDR and play therapy were designed, they were not designed for the people that we see. They were not designed for people that look like us. And so there are a lot of pieces that we might miss if we only look at the protocol in the paper. And so I was honored to be able to have those two experiences. And now I'm very intentional when I do like continuing education credits. I do playful EMDR. I do it from people who have a cultural lens, also from people who incorporate play therapy with EMDR. And so I actually use it across the spectrum for my adults and my children, because what I've noticed is that now some of the worksheets for the kids are more like, when the feelings and stuff, it's, jump like a frog or do all that. I don't do that with my adults. But I definitely make sure that I try to make it as playful, because I recognize when you take some of the seriousness off of it, people are more open to exploring it, as well as remembering that most of my adults are dealing with childhood trauma. And so to say that most, if not all of my adults really didn't have the ideal childhood that we would think would be an ideal childhood to bring us into adulthood. And so they love it. But I do tell people I am EMDR certified. I am a racial play therapist. I use it as a tool. Yeah. And I'm not the person that will be able to do an EMDR intensive with you, where we sit there and we do the one and we follow the eye movement for 4 hours straight. Megan Hamm is not your girl for that.
That's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was going to be my next question for you, Megan. Like, what does that process look like with EMDR? If there's someone watching this podcast and they're just interested in learning about things that could help them with their mental health, what does EMDR help with? And then also, what does that process look like in your practice?
So in my practice, like I said, I use EMDR as a tool. A lot of work that I do with individuals, and to think about trauma. Sometimes with trauma, we don't have the words as an adult, as a child. The thing I absolutely love about EMDR, and what my clients seem to love, is that you don't have to tell the story. EMDR is about being able to reprocess the thoughts, the feelings, the pictures, the emotions that go with the trauma without having to tell the story about it. Yes. And a lot of people respect that. They respect the fact that, you mean we can go deep inside where that started, and we can reprocess my whole thoughts about the thing that happened. And so that's a lot of what I do with my individuals that I work with. And when we do reprocess, and some clinicians who do it, like, I would say, I'm not going to say strict protocol, but some of them go like, EMDR session is, we go straight to straight. Mine, we do some reprocessing. My people like to talk. So we do a little talking, and then the next day, the next session, we'll do some more reprocessing. I don't make them feel like, okay, once we start this, we have to absolutely stop it. We have to finish the whole thing before we can move on to something else. And they really seem to like that. And it helps me, because it makes me feel like I get to, like I said, still bring myself and who I am and who I have developed myself to be as a clinician. And so I would tell somebody who's thinking about therapy, who's had a lot of trauma and just doesn't have the words for it. They don't want to tell the story. EMDR would be the perfect avenue or intervention to look into, a protocol to look into, so that you don't have to tell the story, but you still get to reprocess that trauma. Another thing with EMDR that I love about the training that I have is EMDR is about reprocessing trauma, but then also desensitizing it and reprocessing it. So a lot of things culturally, the trauma that we deal with, honestly, as Black people in America, I'm gonna just say, like, a lot of the things that we deal with, it's hard to reprocess something that's still going on. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So a lot of it is about just being able to desensitize it, making sure they have good coping skills. Because it's hard for me to have somebody who's dealing with some trauma of, let's say, a relationship with their mom, and I'll come in and be like, okay, let's just pretend that's not still going on right now in this moment. And so a lot of it is the desensitization of it. And sometimes people call that EMD, because we don't always do the reprocessing. Which would be able to take it and create something different from it. And so that's a lot of what we do. I do in my practice is we do the desensitization part, which is just being able to go in, taking that, identifying where that trauma comes from, where the thoughts come from, where that core belief is, and being able to help you. When I'm talking to kids, I say, help you make sense of it in your world. And a lot of times it's about self-forgiveness and then forgiving other people.
Awesome. Megan, what have been some of your biggest challenges along your clinical journey? And I'll start with that question and then I'll come with the second question.
Oh, honestly, my biggest challenges would have to be being in rural Mississippi, working for community mental health, getting paid not enough of a living wage, and wanting to learn to do something different. Because EMDR was not a drop in the bucket, right? To be trained and certified.
Yes.
The same thing with play therapy. And so I think my biggest challenge was just being able to, that mindset of, I know I needed more, and it was okay for me to ask for more for myself as a clinician, because sometimes in community mental health, the environment is, well, some people you can help and some people you can't. And if you can't help them, it just, some people just don't want to be helped. But what I realized is that, these people who were actively coming to therapy every week for 6 years with umpteen therapists, I don't think it's that they don't want to be helped. But what happens is, if you have somebody dealing with some deep-rooted childhood trauma, and all I want to talk about is why your light bill ain't paid, and are you doing deep breathing? Like, there was no connection of that, of like, how do we really meet the people where they are? Because if people weren't moving through therapy and community mental health setting, it was like, oh, they don't want the help. They don't want it bad enough. And so for me, I knew that I felt like there was more to it. And when I got introduced to trauma, in terms of like being trauma informed and then trauma trained, I'm like, okay, this is the piece I've been missing. This is the part that we're not talking about. And even, being in Mississippi, and when people, even to this day, people ask me, when I tell people where I'm from, they're like, oh, people take a pause and take a deep breath, So the reality is, we know the history. So being in Mississippi and then saying, hey, I think we need to dig into the trauma. I think we need to dig into the trauma that comes from racial stuff. I think we need to dig into the trauma of just being a Black woman in Brookhaven, Mississippi, And I think a lot of times people aren't ready for those conversations. And so I think that's been one of the things that kind of is always there. We're always navigating that.
Yeah, that sounds like that would be a huge challenge, because you're right. There is so much intergenerational trauma in that geographical area, right? And we also have the cultural norm of, keep it quiet, keep it secret, right? There's the secret keeping nature of it. So the idea of, oh, we're gonna actually pull the curtain open and shed light on some of this pain, this trauma, this abuse, this racial injustice, it can absolutely be terrifying for people. And I think that has kept people stuck over time. So yeah, that's a huge challenge. Yeah. So Megan, what would you say on your clinical journey have been your biggest wins, your biggest WINSs?
Oh, I think my biggest win was being overlooked for an opportunity and allowing that to be the reason I went into private practice.
Oh, lovely. Tell me that story.
So, I'm from Mississippi, right? So I was working, and I think part of it was, in the moment, I didn't think about it like that, because it just, to me, that's how it has been. That's how it is. And so I became fully licensed and was not offered. I was working for an organization that I guess they didn't look at people being fully licensed. It wasn't something that they obtained people to be. Like, it's kind of like a sense of work here, work here, work here, work here. But nobody ever talked about, increase your clinical skills, go do this, go get fully licensed. And so when I did, because most people didn't where I worked, and when I did, like, I wasn't offered like a pay increase or anything. But then I was offered a promotion. And they were like, okay, well, we see you, we offer you this promotion. But they didn't tell me they were hiring for 2 positions. Of course, I got the lower position. And my job was to train the person who walked in the door and got the position over me. And at first it was like, okay, this is kind of how it goes. You have to prove yourself. And something in me was like, no, you don't. Like you don't have to. And so just a series of things, some things were going on in my personal life. And I just was like, you know what? I think I could do this on my own. And so I decided to open a private. I stepped out, and you people say step out on faith. And I opened my own private practice.
That's yeah. It's so wonderful how the universe does that for us, where what we think is a denial, or what we think is a rejection, turns out to be our elevation. And that is wonderful. I love that. I have a similar experience of kind of what seemed like a disappointment turned out to be absolutely the blessing in disguise. And when I went and I saw the CEO of that company that I was let go from, and I said, "Thank you so much. I didn't realize I was stuck, and you freed me. Thank you." I love that. I love that. I love that. Mona, Jacinta, any other questions?
I see that you are an Argosy grad.
I am.
Me too. Yay.
So I have to defend Argosy, right? Because I went to when I lived in Atlanta, I went to Argosy. I did not go online. I went to campus 3 times a week. And just because they're no longer here does not mean that my degree is not valid.
No,
right?
that
So I
doesn't
have
mean
to defend it.
that is not at all what that means.
I know somebody was like, "Oh, they went belly up because they were giving out fake degrees." No, they were not fake.
Not
and they
why
were hard
they went belly up.
So yes, I am an Argosy grad.
How did you end up on the board of NAMI?
Honestly, I was so I have a bad habit of joining organizations and volunteering, right? And I tell people all the time, I just feel like I'm naturally nosy. And so like if something's going on, I don't need you to tell me the newsletter. I want to be in the room where they're making the decision, so I already know. Right. And so I went to there was a conference in my area. A church had hosted a mental health conference. And so as a mental health professional, I went to the conference, and then NAMI had a table there, and we didn't have a NAMI in my area. And so I was like, hey, I think that, I want to start a NAMI in my area. And when I talked to the lady who was at the time, she was the executive director, she's like, oh, well, I'm already working with a small team of individuals who want to have a NAMI in this area too. And so I joined that committee. We worked really hard, and there was a couple who were, they were the representatives for the state. And then they had some personal things going on. And so they were back and forth from Mississippi to Tennessee. And so they were like, hey, who wants to serve on the board? And I was like, oh, yeah, of course I'll do it. And so for me, it was at this point when I started serving for the NAMI board, I was already serving on 3 or 4 other boards. And I'm going to tell you, literally, like I've been really active on LinkedIn lately. And I see people like, oh, I've been honored to be able to serve on this board and that board. And we were in a meeting, and it's kind of, and maybe look at a different perspective. And we were in a meeting, and we were talking about people not coming to board meetings. And our president, she was like, I think it's time for people to stop using us as a resume builder. And I was like, a resume builder? And so here I am serving on all of these boards, and it wasn't even on my resume because I didn't connect it like that, And so that's when I went back. I was like, let me update these bios and add this to my CV. And so I have a heart for serving. I love to be in a position where I could be the voice of reason, but I'm not afraid to be the voice of opposition either. Right? I'm not afraid to be the one to say, you know what, that don't make sense for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I'm the only vote against something, but that's fine. I'm okay with that. But definitely, so I definitely take it as an honor to be on the board. It's kind of like, that's just kind of how it happened. I volunteered. But I have definitely now in my life, I have to realize that I have to set boundaries with my volunteerism. it literally had gotten to the point where I would get up in the morning on Saturday morning and I'll be like, now who am I supposed to be serving today? And it was like always something. And one night I came home and was getting ready to cook dinner. And my daughter was like, Ma, you don't have a meeting tonight? And I realized I was doing a lot of serving outside of my home, which my home was taken care of. But my family always saw me as busy. And I think, and it kind of hurt my feelings because in my mind, I'm not busy. I'm not busy enough, right? And so I definitely now am more intentional on the things that I do. Even in serving on the board for NAMI and, executive positions within my sorority and different things like that, I still make sure that I am being intentional and, okay, how much do I want to do? And then am I doing the things that I really enjoy? Because when you're most stressed out in the volunteer stuff, you might need to figure something else out. And so, yeah, I like being in the room when the decisions are made. So that's how I decided to join NAMI. That's the short answer. I don't like to get it in the newsletter.
I love that. I love that. The volunteerism and joining the boards. I think it gives me an idea of maybe adding new things to the PMRP packet. Like, ooh, maybe they should find a board to join.
Yeah. And the thing is, a lot of times, especially boards and mental health boards do not have a lot of mental health professionals.
Yeah.
It's I ain't gonna say it's weird, but it's like, so who are you making the decisions for? And who is that voice of reason?
Right.
And so, like, look, even I know NAMI in Georgia. They probably have like the small affiliates or
we have NAMI Decatur here. It's really good and really active. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you were saying, Megan. Yes. Yes. Mona, Jacinta, any other questions for Megan?
I guess my question would kind of be the question that we kind of use here where we kind of wrap up with, like, what are your future hopes as it pertains to our field and what we do? What are your best hopes for the future of the profession?
Oh man, I want people to understand when they come into the profession, right? And that when we are really being entrusted with people's lives. And I think a lot of times we know that and we understand that, and we start out gung-ho and then we get overwhelmed. But I really want us as the professionals, as mental health professionals, to be able to meet people where they are, get out of our heads about how it's supposed to be, and just allow people to be themselves. A lot of times in this journey, the thing that I tell people all the time is, it's easy for me to talk about being trauma informed and be trauma informed because I meet and I treat everybody as if they're going through something. And so compassion is naturally what I do. I'm naturally a compassionate person.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we really do. And I've been there before. Like, I definitely have been to the stage of burnout where I would be in an intake and hear somebody's story. And in my mind, I'm already saying, okay, well, if you just do ... and ... we wouldn't even be here, And so that's when we know we're burnt out. And so we, as the professionals, have to choose to do something different, have to choose to be able to be lifelong learners, to say,
Yes.
Things are going to change. The way depression looked when I started in this field 17 years ago does not show up the same way today, even with the kids. And remember that we ain't they mama. Like, our job is not to reprimand them. Our job is not to, and I work with kids, so my job is not to reprimand them. And I tell parents all the time, my job is not to be like the godmama or the other auntie. No, I'm not going to be the one to saying, you shouldn't have been doing ... Like, that's not what I do. And so being able to honor that and honor where we are, and that people really do look up to us, even when we don't think that they are. They really do look up to us just because of who we are.
Oh, I love that, Megan. Yes. That really speaks to, as clinicians and as geeky clinicians, that we have to have that awareness of the responsibility that we hold in that therapeutic space, and how we have to meet the clients with love and respect, and really kind of approach them in a holistic way, and not, take it for granted by not doing our personal work, because burnout, we know, is real. And so that awareness for us of, like, I love that example that you gave, like when you're feeling like, well, if they're sharing their experience or their trauma, and we're just like, well, if you could have done that, like if we're having that shortness in ourselves, to recognize, oh, this is not okay, and I need to get support, like from other geeky clinicians, and have community, so that way I can stave off that burnout. I can have, even having another clinician hold up the mirror to us and be like, this is what burnout looks like. I'm seeing, I'm hearing it. Because I know you're a better therapist than this. I know you're a better clinician than this. What's happening for you right now? Right. And I think that community is key. And I know that you have therapist besties, and you're part of therapy communities and stuff like that. And so just wanted to speak to that for a second, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah. And I honestly, because when I started my private practice during COVID, and like I said, when I started my practice, there were not any practices in my area. There were not any Black clinicians in my area. And so I found clinicians of color online. And honestly, just being able to have community, or having a place where you can just take a deep breath and say that today was hard, without people saying, well, are you really good at your job? And well, should you be doing this? But also being able to be with you in the moment to say, hey, yeah, this is where you are. And also, but what is it that you need? Make sure you take what you need, but also making sure that you grow from the experience. And so since then, since having access to that, I definitely have created my own community. The awesome thing about my community is I think I'm usually in these spaces, I'm usually one of the only people from Mississippi. Right. And to tell you that there is a mindset difference of just seeing clinicians in other areas, even areas that are predominantly Black, seeing clinicians in other areas, and just the mindset is just different because our experiences are different. And the thing I would say is, once my mind was expanded, and it wasn't because it wasn't there, but it was because of lack of exposure. Because like I said, I saw nobody around me who was doing what I did at the level that I knew God had told me I was going to do it at. Right. And so it was always, the goal was get you a good job, work your way up the ladder, and sit tight. That was the goal. Like I didn't see that in my area. So having community definitely has expanded my mind, expanded the ideas of what can be. And also I think it's the reason I'm now a play therapist and I'm EMDR certified, so that I can bring those things to my community. So the only option people won't have is going to a place like community mental health, where everybody is just a generalist. There's nothing wrong with it, but everybody's a generalist. And so it's, you learn a little bit about this, you learn a little bit about that, and whoever sits in front of your chair, you just got to give them the best you got. Uno game after Uno game, right?
Game after Uno game, exactly. Well, Megan, we are so excited and thrilled to have had you as a guest today. And we're so glad to have you as part of our Geeky Clinicians community, right? You're one of us. So thank you so much for being here. And we appreciate you so much. For those who are watching, if you haven't already, please like and share and subscribe. And we will see you on the next episode.